morning.
Hello.
How are you?
Great. How are you?
So looking at the screen, looking at you. So, yeah, welcome everybody. We got a beautiful day. Excited to get out and enjoy it. Welcome to our Saturday morning session. Today we're going to be talking about intermittent fasting, right?
Yes.
Fun topic.
The hot one.
Yeah, it's really big today. See a lot of written and talked about as far as intermittent fasting. We hear about it all the time. I think it's so let's say overused out there that there's a lot of mystery about what intermittent fasting actually is, what it isn't, how it's used for weight loss, how it's used for just health benefits in general. Things like, how does it actually work in practice, and ultimately, what are the benefits of it? So Andy and I had a long conversation this morning about intermittent fasting, and I'd say sort of come at it from different approaches. But why don't you talk a little bit about, and I know you can't stay this whole time, but why don't you talk a little bit about your experience with intermittent fasting and where you see it fitting into your program?
Well, I love intermittent fasting. I think it's an easy tool to use. And I came up with the analogy this morning of if your body is like a car and your nutrition is like a car, then intermittent fasting is like the accelerator that you can push your foot down on to really intensify any of the results. If you're working on fat loss, it definitely increases that burn. So I think intermittent fasting is a great tool, and there is a lot of mystery around it, but in simplest terms, it's just meal timing. It's just when you're eating and when you're not eating, and that's really as basic as it gets. But it can be used as a tool to maintain weight so that you can add some carbs to your diet, to your program, and have that date night or that cheat night, and then fast the next day and kind of get back to normal. Or you can be using it while you're working on fat loss, just to kind of, like I said, accelerate those results and just create more of a burn. So I think it's a really cool, flexible tool to be used, for different intentions. And it's also just a really good thing to do for your body, because if you think about, kind of caveman person, they weren't eating all the time. They were, it was feast or famine, truly. And that's kind of the way our body is set up. And it gives our body a nice break from digesting, where it can work on other stuff like, cell rejuvenation and all the good things that can go on in our body when we let our body take a break from, just working on digesting food all the time. So I think there's tons of research. I know you're going to go into some of that on why intermittent fasting is so good. But as far as what it is, it's just when you eat and when you don't eat. And that's pretty much all it is. But like I said, it can be used for a few different reasons.
Mm-hmm. So I think that's really important to realize is that, there's fasting, right? Where, that's an occasional thing that people will go into periodically just to do that cleanse. That's certainly understandable. Intermittent fasting is really intended to be used, let's say, on a regular basis, but it's, it's it should be part of a nutrition program. And as Andy said, I like what you said as far as it's a tool. It's one of the things that you can take out to accelerate health, to accelerate fat loss. And it's something that takes practice to get good at. Mm-hmm. And I'll talk a little bit about some of the different methodologies around intermittent fasting, but that's kind of the intro. We, on the Keto Flex formula, we definitely do have it incorporated in there. We have right now, like a 2-week stretch of intermittent fasting. Really gives you a good opportunity to try it out, maybe try it in some different ways with timing and what you include and what you don't include. So we'll go through that. One quick thing though, and this is something we talked about earlier this morning as well, was that intermittent fasting is not necessarily calorie reduction in one form. It's just addressing let's call it a feeding window, so that you're only eating within a certain amount of time, but the calories are remaining the same. Now, I think that a lot of folks believe that, and it's certainly a way to approach it, is that it's just elimination of a meal, right? So cut breakfast out of your meal plan, you've taken 400, 600 calories out of your daily consumption, you're going to lose weight, most likely. But there's the other approach where it's changing that feeding window and getting those same calories in a shorter amount of time.
I think that's a really good point, and I think it kind of it kind of mirrors like exercise when you're talking about that. I'm thinking, there's different intentions around exercise. Not every workout is going to be a high intensity workout or a strength workout. Some days you just want to go for a walk or do a yoga routine or whatever it is. And I think intermittent fasting can kind of be approached like that too, depending on the intention of it. So for sure, if you're working on fat loss with intermittent fasting, then it is a calorie reducing strategy, because even though you're eating more perhaps at one meal because you've waited so long to eat, you're still reducing calories by eliminating that meal. Or it's just you're taking all your food and condensing it into that window. So it sort of depends on what you're trying to do with your fasting, because it can be used as a fat loss tool, or it can be used, just as a maintenance, or just helping get that metabolism going in the morning, by postponing that first meal.
So, okay. Anything else?
No.
We're gonna say goodbye to you.
Bye. Have a nice.
Yeah, and I'm gonna go to a PowerPoint here and take you through that. So, bye. We're gonna switch here. So I'm gonna share this screen, right? Bear with me a second here. So there we go. And play this from the start. So there it is, intermittent fasting, talked about it. So intermittent fasting, and again, one of the key components of the Keto Flex formula and a lot of the coaching and weight loss instruction that we do incorporates intermittent fasting. So it's really important to understand what it is, what it isn't, and the benefits of it. This is nothing new, right? Intermittent fasting has been around for as long as people have been eating. Andy talked about it before, sort of the primal approach to it is that our bodies were not meant to sit there and graze all day long. We were really set up to do, eat larger, less frequent meals, and then have longer periods of time between eating. So, you go out and hunt on a saber-toothed tiger and, do that whole thing and eat that, whatever part of it. And then maybe there wouldn't be another meal for another day, for another 24 hours or so. So that's, that's kind of that's more of the primal approach to feeding. And there's a whole philosophy around that. But essentially intermittent fasting was not something that was, the exception over human history. It was more the norm. So, and as I say down there, sort of, intermittent fasting is about when you eat, not what you eat. So certainly, incorporating intermittent fasting into a keto program, double effect there, really accelerate fat loss. So if you do that, but you can certainly do intermittent fasting and just, pursue your regular diet, whatever that is. So again, when you eat, not what you eat. I think first of all, just to understand a little bit about how intermittent fasting works, you really need to understand the difference about what's called the fed state versus the fasted state, not faster state, fasted state. So the body is typically in the fed state when it's digesting and absorbing, when you're eating it, absorbing and digesting food, right? Typically that fed state goes about 3 to 5 hours, right? As you're actually, processing the food that you've eaten, and your body absorbs that food that you just ate. And when you're in this fed state, it's hard for your body to target the fat burn, the fat loss, right? Because basically, when you're eating, you're going to, especially if you're eating carbohydrate-rich foods, what's happening is that those carbohydrates are turning immediately to glycogen in your system, which your system burns right away, right? So it sort of shuts off burning some of that stored fat, and it goes, oh, we have this really cool stuff coming into our system right now, glycogen, we love to burn that, it's easier, it's faster, we're going to go after that. So your body essentially stops burning the fat and shifts over to burning the readily available carbohydrates that are coming in a burnable form. So how intermittent fasting works is that after that fed state, your body goes into another state, saying that it's not absorbing a meal, and that post-absorptive state lasts from 8 to 12 hours after your last meal, which is when you're in that fasted state. And it's much easier at that point for your body to burn stored fat, primarily because insulin levels are low. So, you eat carbohydrates, your blood sugar is going to spike up. In reaction to that, insulin, floods the system to push that blood sugar back down. And when that's happening, again, you're burning those carbs, not the fat. But when you're in that fasted state, your insulin levels are low. It's already done its job as far as combating the high blood sugar. It pushes it back down. And that's when the insulin is out of the system, that's when you can start to burn the stored fat, right? So that's kind of how it works. The reality of it is, because we usually, Western culture, eating habits, etc., we're rarely in that fasted state, right? We don't really get into that fasted state until about 12 hours after our last meal. So our bodies are usually never there. We're almost always, battling that insulin release and burning their carbohydrates. So this is one of the reasons why people who don't change anything else but start doing intermittent fasting see a sudden weight loss or fat loss because of that, because their bodies have never really entered that fasted state. So, in most protocols for intermittent fasting, there's about a 16-hour downtime. So those 4 hours is really when you accelerate that fat burn. So, so the fasting puts your body into that fat burning state rather than, carbohydrate, glycogen burning state that you're in before. So that's how it works. As far as sort of thinking about this as a schedule, it sounds a little harsh, like saying, a feeding window. I always think it sounds like, feeding time at the zoo. When they're going to feed the tigers and you go in there and you go stand and watch it. But so it's a little bit harsh as far as the term goes. But that's the idea, is that there's this time when you're eating and then there's time when you're not eating. So we recommend on our programs that you fast at night, right? When you're sleeping is the best time to do it. And then eating your first meal at about 11 or 12. So if you look at the chart here, the sleeping, the fasted occurs, certainly, from about 8 p.m. So the kind of our protocol is that stop eating, last meal, last thing in your mouth is about 8 p.m. and then let your body go through the absorptive state and then into the fasted state. And then let's say, from 8 in the morning till noon, boom, that's where you're really doing the substantial fat burn. Your body is truly fasted and you're accessing those fat stores for energy, right? So feeding time from 12 noon till about 8 p.m., fasting time from about 8 p.m. till about 12 o'clock the next day. So, and it takes some time to get used to it. I'm on my solid day 5 of it. And some days I'm really hungry. And I have some water or coffee or something and feel better. The other thing I will tell you is that if I'm really hungry, it usually works out like this, because I usually do my exercise in the morning. But usually, if I'm hungry and I go work out, that usually pushes it off. And by 12 o'clock, I'm hungry. I'm looking forward to it. I'm ready to eat. The other thing you'll notice with this that's pretty cool is that if you haven't done intermittent fasting before, and all of a sudden you go into the program of intermittent fasting, you'll start to realize that you're driven as much by the psychological, the act of preparing food, and the enjoyment and the endorphins and everything that come sort of as a reward when you're having that breakfast. So first couple of days, I was like, I really missed preparing and eating breakfast, but it wasn't because I was hungry. It was like there was more habit that I was trying to work through, and my body is very used to doing that. So there's a little bit of change there, but again, I think most of that is psychological. Obviously, if you hit a point where you don't feel good, in those first early days, just see what you can do. Again, drinking some coffee. I've always got my sparkling water here that I go to. It seems to fill me up and do the job. So that's a little bit about the feeding time. The benefits of intermittent fasting, and there's a lot out there online about this, but I'm just going to summarize this. So first thing is weight loss. Intermittent fasting will help you lose weight and belly fat without really consciously trying to restrict calories. So again, if you're a breakfast, lunch, dinner, maybe a night snack person, what you're doing is maybe you do, your breakfast, right, at about noon, your lunch maybe at about 3, your dinner at 6 or whenever you eat dinner, and then maybe there's a snack and you're done by 8 o'clock. So that's it. So that's one approach. You're just going to take that same calorie level, same meal schedule, and just compress it to an 8-hour window. Andy was talking about the approach where you just eliminate breakfast. So that's just a different thought process around that. That's really calorie reduction and intermittent fasting. But anyway, so weight loss will occur. If you change that feeding window and keep the same calories and just lessen that feeding window, you'll lose weight because you're going to get the benefits from fasting. Second thing is insulin resistance. It's been proven that intermittent fasting can reduce insulin resistance, lowering blood sugar and fasting insulin levels. So that's significant. So, I'm pretty diligent about checking my blood sugar, probably not every day, but every other day to see where I am. And when I'm intermittent fasting and maybe not changing anything else, my blood sugars are really down. And again, that's really important. We talk about battling, diabetes and some of the other, chronic conditions that can come out of having the elevated blood glucose levels in your system. So that's probably the best health benefit that you derive from intermittent fasting. Inflammation, right? So think about inflammation. You cut your hand like I did, it swells up, it gets red. That's inflammation coming to address an injury or an issue in your body, right? But chronic inflammation stems from, continued high carbohydrate diet, high levels of insulin in your system. So inflammation, chronic inflammation in your body is not a good thing and leads to chronic disease, heart disease, diabetes, things that we want to fight off. So again, reduction of inflammation is really important and one of the benefits from intermittent fasting. Couple of other things. So heart health, intermittent fasting may help to reduce the LDL numbers, triglycerides, as I talked about before, inflammatory markers, blood sugar and insulin, all will become reduced through the process of intermittent fasting. There have been a lot of studies out there, animal studies, that suggest intermittent fasting may help prevent cancer. One of the things that is out there and talked about a lot is just our body's constantly being in this overfed state and how that contributes to growth of bad things in our systems. They talked about the inflammation, but also feeding some other processes in our system. And there's some belief that cancer is, in some forms of cancer are related to just that constant overfed state. You're feeding these cells constantly, and they're looking for ways to grow, and that kind of opens up the door to some of those bad things. So this next one is pretty interesting. Brain health. Intermittent fasting increases the brain hormone, and I'm not a brain hormone expert, but study has shown the brain hormone BDNF and may aid the growth of new nerve cells. May also protect against Alzheimer's, and then, anti-aging, intermittent fasting, in animal studies that, these rats lived 36 to 80% longer. So again, the whole idea is that you're allowing your body to do some cleansing, you're allowing your body to burn those fat stores, you're lowering the amount of insulin and blood sugar in your system and then that derives a whole lot of other benefits. So think about that. Some intermittent fasting tips. Let your body burn fat between meals. Don't snack. So if you're going to keep this 3-meal schedule, your breakfast is at noon, something at 3 or 4, and then 6 or 7. Don't snack in between that. Be active throughout the day. Build your muscle tone. Do some resistance training, some walking, but let your body burn fat. Give it the opportunity. Don't constantly be pouring, gas in the gas tank. Consider a simple form of intermittent fasting. So Andy and I are both, we would both say we're doing intermittent fasting now, but a little bit different. Limit the hours of the day when you eat. For best effect, make it earlier in the day when you're eating. Some people like this, like they want to eat early. They're so hungry, they just can't concentrate. And maybe they do like a 7 a.m. to 3 p.m. type fast or feeding window and then fasting the rest of the day. I personally can hold out till noon, so that's what I do. It works for me. Like I said, if I sprinkle a workout in there, it sort of pushes off the hunger a little bit longer, and I feel good. I feel good working out, fasted as well. So that's something that takes a little bit of time to do, but you definitely can push through it. Um, so, but but the key here is getting into that 16-hour window of fasting. So however you want to manipulate that. Like I talked about, drinking plenty of water, coffee, keep that, keep hydrated as you go through this. And working out while you're fasted is okay. Like I said, it's something that I do all the time. It actually will accelerate fat loss at that point. So avoid snacking or eating at nighttime. Snacking is bad, especially when you're trying to intermittent fast. Don't throw that fuel in the tank. Just let your body do what it knows to do, which is go access those fat stores and burn those. So that's it. So definitely a hot topic these days. A lot of people doing it, a lot of people trying it. I would say there's no right or wrong as long as you're getting into that window of feeding and then fasting, again, 16-8. The other thing I was going to say about Andy's program, she's doing more of a 5 days on, 2 days off. So recognizing, she's got some early morning commitments and things like that. She prefers to have that breakfast a couple days a week. And so far I've been able to just to push right through it. So it's really up to you. So anyway, that's it. Thanks so much for joining us today, and have a great one. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to contact me or Andy at You Better Now, and we'll talk to you later.